Over the weekend, I watched the movie The Deer Slayer with Robert De Niro. Now, I got to go into this for a reason. It's directly related to politics and religion. I had seen it a few times in pieces. It was very long, like 3 hours long. The opening hour of that movie, the opening 90 minutes of that movie, is astounding. First, there's a wedding in a town outside Pittsburgh in the steel mills. These are blue-collar guys, steel workers. And the Roman Catholic Church that is portrayed in that film is one of the most beautiful portrayals of religion as practiced by common people I've ever seen in my life. It was astoundingly beautiful. And you look at it and you wonder what happened to America, how these men all grew up in the same community, all went to the same church, all were married in the same church, all buried their parents in that same church. And the continuity then leads them to Vietnam. They're drafted and they go into the army together, and they fight together. And the portrayal of how the American men were brutalized by the NVA. Now, whether this was an isolated incident or it occurred more frequently, I do not know. But the absolute brutality of the torture inflicted on the American men by the Vietnamese communists was so beyond anyone's conception of chillingly frightening that it's hard to portray unless you've seen the movie. You should see it again. But the chill of that movie was how the communists swept through South Vietnam, not only how they killed the American men. I know many of you are brainwashed into thinking that the American men were the brutals. Oh, were your brains washed by Joan Baez and the left-wing vermin of this country, from Walter Cronkite to every stinker in the media who told you that we were the bad ones. Take a look at what happened after we left Vietnam, when those communist evil men killed over 1 million South Vietnamese, re-education camps, torture camps, death camps. That didn't make it to the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. That didn't make it to the folk songs of Joan Baez. That didn't make it into your mind. No, all you had was the American men, the heroes who went over there and fought and died and came back, some of them ruined for life, some of them improved for life. You didn't know any of that. All you knew was that they were struggling for their independence and Ho Chi Minh was a hero. But the point I'm making is, starts with that church, the religion, the guys go to Vietnam and how they're tortured and how they escape that and what it does for them, how it affects them for the rest of their lives. And you look at that and you say to yourself, you better fight against communism with everything in you. You know, when I saw the scene of the people fleeing Saigon at the end of that movie, as the communists sweep into power and sweep through the south of Vietnam, when I saw the people with their packages of the goods that they could grab out of their houses and they're running away, I said, it can't happen here. It can't happen here. It is happening here. You say, oh, come on, you're crazy, you're an extremist. Things don't happen overnight. They happen by degree. Revolutions don't happen overnight. They happen by degree. Obama is a revolutionary communist by every one of his acts. Bill Ayers is Barack Obama. We told you this before the election. Make no mistake about it. He's just a smooth con man. And he conned you white liberals in particular into thinking he was for you and you for him. I am telling you as I stand here that every instinct in me, whatever I may have in the instinctual department, that I have been right 100 times on the show over 15 years. Every instinct in me tells me that we are watching a slow-growing communist revolution in this country. And it can still be altered. It can still be stopped. But if you don't recognize who this man is and how his closest associates are exactly in that image, then you know nothing about history, you know nothing about the current times, and you cannot see a thing as to what is coming in the future. So I told you that religion would eventually lead back to politics, and politics would lead us back to religion. So on that note, let me summarize what I just said. Go and watch The Deer Slayer. The Deer Hunter, I'm sorry, with Robert De Niro. And watch particularly the scenes in the church. Because who directed that movie? I don't remember who directed that film. But, you know, those days are over of film direction. Guys, look it up while we're talking. The genius of the director here was that he used common people from that area and from that church in the film, mixed in with the actors. So that when you see a wedding scene, you're seeing the old geezer sitting at the bar from the town. When you see a church scene, you're seeing the regular people from the church mixed in with the I believe these people ethnically were either Polish Americans or Russian Americans or a mixture of both, and who were largely the steel workers at that time in that area. And how they go over to Vietnam. And, of course, it was their hunting skills, their ability to use guns, and their ability to hunt that permitted them to survive in Vietnam. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? The same thing was true. The same thing was true, by the way, in World War II, if you studied the history of our fighter pilots. Many of them came from farms they'd never flown before, but they grew up with a .22 caliber rifle hunting small game. And I remember reading some of these pilots who flew the P-51s, the Mustangs. They said that when they went to flight school and then they went into aerial combat, it was the same as hunting a rodent or a deer. They learned that they had when they're fighting the enemy fighter, they had to lead the plane. They had to fire their bullets ahead of the plane that was flying across their field of vision, just as an animal running. Now, how are you going to teach that to a kid who never fired a gun in his life? How are you going to teach that to a kid who grew up complaining about everything, taught to complain, that he feels like he has an inner woman in him, and he has to get down and cry when someone asks him to do something hard? He complains, he cries, he sues, he goes back to mommy. How in the world can a country survive with a nation of imbeciles like this that we've raised for the last 20 years? How in the world can we ever survive? How can this country ever defend itself? And when you add that picture up of the weakling generation that we have raised, the drug addicts, the Ritalin addicts, the potheads, the cokeheads, you name it, compare that with a growing threat from China, where they have millions of unmarried men, where they have a population of males way in excess of females by design. And I want you to understand that it was by design. That the one-child policy of China, where the girl baby was aborted and the boy baby was permitted to be born, was done specifically to create approximately 10 million extra men. And there is not a time in history that a nation that has had such excess in men has not gone to war. Think about it, fool. I'll be right back.
Savage.